Hello everyone, this is Pammy Jaiswal.
Hi, this is Payal Agarwal.
We welcome back all of you to the Saaraansh series. So today's episode is the last episode when it comes to the insider trading segment of the Saaraansh series. Now today's topic is on structured digital database. The name itself is self-explanatory. It is a database to be maintained digitally in a structured manner. Before going further, as in who is required to maintain, what is the intent of maintaining the SDD, what are the features of SDD, what is the contents of the SDD, and what all other affirmative requirements are associated with SDD. Let's understand, or let's start with the intent, right? Because this requirement of an SDD or a structured digital database is unique to India. So the intent here is to assist the law makers, the regulators, to help in the course of investigation for cases where there has been a leakage of UPSI in listed entities.
Right. So, as you said, SDD basically is a sequential or a register of the various entries of sharing of UPSI.
Right.
And as such, it is required to be maintained by every listed company. When I say every listed company, it means an equity listed company as well as a debt listed company. So for each listed company, whenever there is a sharing of UPSI, be it an internal sharing of UPSI amongst the DPs or any other employees of the company, or be it an external sharing of UPSI with some other third party, of course, for a legitimate purpose, the same will require an entry in the structured digital database. Not only this, even the fiduciaries and intermediaries are also required to maintain SDD. And in their SDD, two types of entries are required to be made. One, on receipt of a UPSI from any listed company, and second, upon internal sharing of such UPSI. So, for example, if I receive a UPSI from a company and I'm required to further share it with my team members for the purpose of a legitimate assignment or something, we will be required to maintain two entries. Firstly, on receipt of such UPSI from the company, and secondly, upon internal sharing of such UPSI.
Correct. So when Payal says that we have received UPSI or we receive UPSI from our clients, that is only for the purpose of legitimate businesses, for legitimate consultancy and not otherwise, right? So keeping that in mind, let's proceed with the next part of today's episode, which is going to contain what features or what contents are required to be there under the SDD. Starting with the contents. Now, SDD will have few specific contents, starting with the nature of UPSI. When I say nature of UPSI, let's take an example that if the entry is with respect to approval of financial results, which is the most common UPSI happening 4 times in a year, right? So there I need not write the figures coming in my financial results, but I can write the nature being that the approval of financial results, right? That can be the entry under the nature requirement or the nature content of the SDD. Now, after nature of UPSI, we need to understand it's clear that exact UPSI, the exact information is not required to be the part of SDD, but only the nature or what is that UPSI dealing with.
And ma'am, what if a company actually puts in the UPSI in the SDD instead of talking about the nature of UPSI?
So in that case, Payal, if I put the UPSI itself in the SDD, I have actually, gone my way out to actually share the UPSI with someone where I was not required to share it. Because UPSI sharing is only required or is only allowed for a legitimate business purposes. So putting the UPSI in the SDD, where this SDD also in turn might have been given access to several people who were otherwise maybe not supposed to know that UPSI at that particular stage when the entry was being made, then that again is you can say a weak spot in the internal control mechanism of a listed entity, right? So after the nature, we have to write the name of the person sharing the UPSI and the person who is receiving the UPSI. For example, if I am sharing the UPSI, my name goes under the person who shared it, and Payal's name would come into the person who has received the UPSI along with the respective PAN numbers or any other similar identification number. Next is the time of sharing and the mode of sharing the UPSI. That's very important. Also, you need to mention the category of the person who has shared the information. For example, if I've shared the information and let's say I'm categorized or identified as a designated person in a listed entity, then my category goes under that. And let's say the person with whom I've shared is not a designated person, but let's say a consultant, right? So the nature or the category of person goes as a consultant or a fiduciary in that particular case. Apart from this, SDD is also is also required to have a very important feature, that is it cannot be outsourced. SDD has to be maintained internally, and even if you're using the software, which obviously I think most of the companies are already using softwares, if you're using a software, it should be internally, the access point or the control point of that software should be within the company, right? So that again is a very important feature. There has to be internal checks and controls in the SDD to allow time stamping as well as the audit trail. So whenever there is any change, any edit made in the SDD, it comes as a separate entry altogether, right? So yeah, that's the feature and that's the content. And next, I think we're going to speak on the affirmation part.
Right. So moving further, the affirmation with respect to the compliance of SDD is required to be given by every listed company through a practicing professional in the annual secretarial compliance report filed under Regulation 24A of Listing Regulations. But as for companies on which Regulation 24A is not applicable, for example, debt listed companies or small listed companies on whom the corporate governance norms are not applicable, they are also required to affirm compliance with the SDD requirements. The compliance affirmation for SDD requirements forms a part of the SDD compliance certificate required to be given on a quarterly basis. Now, this SDD compliance certificate can be given either by the compliance officer of the listed entity itself or by a practicing company secretary. In either case, the compliance certificate contains affirmations with respect to maintaining an SDD, making proper entries in the SDD, having proper access controls in the SDD, the other features of audit trail, time log, non-tamperability, and the possibility of maintaining the entries for a period of preserving the entries for a period of 8 years. In addition to these, there's a factual information required to be given in the certificate, which is with respect to the number of events that were required to be captured during the quarter. Now, as for the number of events, this should ideally mean the number of UPSI that has been shared during the quarter and were required to be reported in the SDD, and not the number of instances a UPSI has been shared and entry has been made, since the same may result into multiple instances of sharing of the same UPSI and will not actually serve any ground.
Right. So I think maybe if we can clarify this point, Payal. So first thing is that when you give this certificate when contains the number of events during a financial year which was entered or the number of categories, they actually mean the category of UPSI shared. For example, if there is an entry for declaration of dividend and there is an entry for approval of financial results, and actually there are only two entries, but this particular UPSI might have been shared with multiple people,
Right.
for legitimate purposes at different points of time. So the entries might be 10 or 12 or 8 or maybe more than 2. But the category that you write there or the number of events that you write there in the SDD certificate will only be 2. Right? Another very important aspect, Payal, which we should also highlight, that we have generally seen companies who are maintaining SDD are simply putting the approval of financial results and the declaration of dividend, mostly they are doing so, in the part of their SDD entries. None of the companies, or you can say many, rarely companies realize that SDD is also required to be used for making entries whenever there is a trading window closure, because whenever there's a trading window closure, there is an existence of UPSI. There is a possibility that UPSI might eventually lose its uh, the identity only, or that particular topic might not be taken up ultimately by the
Right.
management, but the fact that the entry has to be made, that is quite certain. So we need to be very sure on any UPSI, whenever there's a trading window closure, on the germination of UPSI in the entity, and that information is shared. There also is a possibility that we've seen that maybe with higher management, let's say the MD of the company, the CEO of the company, they have that particular information and they share it for a legitimate purpose with one or two people in the organization. And the compliance officer, who generally has the access to make entries, is not even aware that the entries have, that such event has taken place. So therefore the information flow has to be very, very accurate, so that there is no lapse or gaps
Right.
when you make the entries in the SDD. So yes, I think that's it for the SDD episode today. And as I mentioned, that today is the last episode of the Saaraansh series on PIT regulations, but that's not the end, because we would like to, again, we've already informed the world at large, and we are again informing you all that we are coming out with our online course, which is a 30-hour long course on securities law for entities which are either newly listed or are going to be listed, and that's spanning like for more than 15 days, which we're going to host. It's a virtual event, so the details can be found in the caption. So thank you so much.